This is the My Campaign Coach podcast, where we talk about how to win elections. Every week, we let you hear straight from the best consultants, operatives, and candidates in the game, all for one reason, to help you win. For more information about how we can help you win, visit mycampaigncoach.com. Now, here's your host, Raj Schaefer.
Welcome to the How to Run for Office podcast from My Campaign Coach. 2016 was definitely a unique year in politics, and we've talked to alumni of a couple different presidential campaigns here on the podcast. But we haven't had the opportunity to sit down with anyone who served on the hugely successful campaign of President Donald Trump. Today we get to fix that. Before we do, I just want to remind y'all that we're in the process of releasing a couple new free campaign resources through our website and launching our highly praised Advanced Candidate course as a self-paced online class with live Q&A. If you want to be a better candidate or run a stronger campaign, go to mycampaigncoach.com, check out our resources, and sign up for the weekly tips email. Now to the interview. With a strong background in digital media strategy, implementation, writing, marketing, and content creation, Theresa Hong brings more than 15 years of agency, private, nonprofit, and government industry experience, creating and managing numerous marketing, digital media, communications, and political campaigns. She's done it all. While one of Theresa's favorite components of working with clients is the opportunity to sit, listen, and collaborate, she's the first to admit that she is a proud sci-fi and tech geek. Most notably, she loves the integration of technology with relaying powerful messages really fast. Theresa finds satisfaction that the world of communications has managed to preserve the art of face-to-face relationships and building those through traditional media and advertising while intertwining this art with the power of digital media. The power to share an idea, to tell a story, instantly disperse the message that, if done right, has the potential to promote action and change behavior. That's one of the many reasons why Theresa terribly loves what she does. In her past lives, Theresa has served as an account executive managing a variety of diverse clients for McNally Temple, a political consulting agency located in Sacramento. She's also served as communications and digital director for a California state senator, as well as working in the tech and energy sectors. In 2016, Theresa served as a digital content director for the Donald J. Trump for President digital media campaign and the Presidential Inauguration Committee. Right now, Theresa is the Senior Vice President for Communications for Political Branding Associates, where she works closely with Bonnie Siegel, who was a guest of ours on the podcast a couple of weeks back. A San Antonio native, she's incredibly happy to be back in the Alamo City, where her heart and family reside. After hours, you'll probably find her being a tourist in her hometown, accidentally photobombing families in front of the Alamo. Theresa, thanks for taking a break from the photobombing and coming on with us today.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm excited about it. We had an awesome interview, spending time with Bonnie, your colleague, a few weeks ago, talking about branding and the power of that and some of the incredible work you guys have done at Political Branding Associates to bring a lot of the power of branding and your unique perspective on that to the political campaign side. And we talked a lot about her experience on the Ted Cruz campaign. And I'm really excited. You're the first person from the Trump campaign that we've got to have on. And really, there's not a whole lot of interviews, especially with the digital team out there, post-election about kind of what you guys did and how you won the election. And I'm really excited and honored to have you on today.
Thank you. No, I'm really excited to be here.
Well, before we get to President Trump and how you helped get him elected, I want to kind of talk a little bit more and hear about where you came from, your background, what you did, how your ideas of branding and social media developed, and how you ever got to be in that position to take advantage of that opportunity.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, I think my track was a bit different than most people who are kind of pursuing a career in poli-sci or political consulting. I started as an education major and actually received my degree on the 10-year degree plan, by the way, for elementary ed. And after teaching, actually just student teaching, I found out fast that it simply wasn't for me. And so then I went into communications facet, and this was years ago. This was, just pre the advent of social media, pre-digital, pre-everything. So communications were still kind of, going across the fax machine and just, it was just very old school. When I met my husband many years ago, he was based in California, and so that was just where I ended up. And there was an agency in Sacramento called McNally Temple Associates, and it was one of the only conservative political consulting firms in that state. I just applied there on a whim, and for some reason they hired me, and that kind of began my political career, albeit kind of on a more local and state level. And also just kind of PAC and more organizational. So I worked there for several years, and then from there went and worked for one of 12 Republican state senators in California. And I served as their deputy comms director and digital director there for several years. Until I decided that, you know what, I really miss San Antonio. I'm an Alamo City chick, and I wanted to go back. My family's here. And so we made the trek back. And that is when I met Brad Parscale from Giles Parscale, who was the digital director for the Trump campaign. And he had hired me. This was when we were still going through the primary. And he had hired me honestly for a mayoral campaign here in San Antonio, and also for kind of a San Antonio initiative. But when it was clear that President Trump was going to win the primary, he kind of shifted gears. And I'll never forget, it was a Sunday afternoon, it was in May, and we were celebrating my mom's birthday. And he texted me and he said, "Theresa, this is Brad Parscale." And I'm like I don't know. I don't know Brad Parscale. Okay. And he said, "Are you available to work?" And I said, "Of course." He said, "For what?" And he said, "We need to write a digital media strategy and proposal for Trump." And I said, "Okay," just because it was so out of the ordinary. I mean, normally what happens is everything's transferred to the RNC, right? And so we put together this huge digital media proposal with an unprecedented amount of money. I mean, it was $150 million just in advertising budget, and really covered just everything from A to Z. And then I'm still thinking, there's no way we're going to get this. I mean, this is just insane. And then a couple weeks later, if that, we got word that we were going to run the account, and Brad was going to be digital media director. So that kind of parlayed my whole just journey into this crazy awesome campaign, and just super, super proud to have worked with Brad and just some of the most talented people that I've ever had the privilege to meet.
That's truly incredible. I mean, I love the story of how it happened. Y'all's ability to really not be worried about. I think there's a lot of people that if they were to approach the opportunity, they would be really. The way they would try to get that account is trying to pinch the pennies and try to make it small.
Right.
You guys knew from the start that that this was going to be a huge undertaking, and you're like, look, we're going to write it up for what it costs. We're going to put the full kit here, and obviously be conscious of the money. But it's like we're talking about the presidency. We're talking about a national election. We're not going to pretend this can be done on pennies. We're going to do this legit.
Right. Yeah. And I think even more impressive and incredible on Brad's standpoint is that he really bet the farm on digital. I mean, we really are the first campaign that spent this amount of money just purely on the digital landscape. And kudos to him for having the foresight and for having that vision to where, okay, we can reach so many more people and we can be so much more targeted. And yeah, $150 million, it seems like it's a lot of money, but to be able to target messaging, to specific, what we call universes, it was much more not only cost efficient, but just effective in reaching the people with the messages that we thought would resonate with them the most.
Well, and you guys obviously did it right. You got it done, and had quite had an incredibly successful election. They got the president elected. So That's quite the testament to y'all's work there and your foresight. And I want to spend a lot of time on that. But before we get there, I want to kind of dive into some of the things that you learned before that. Because obviously, from your previous experience, working on political campaigns and working in the California State Senator's office, you learned a lot. That's what prepared you to be somebody that could put together that pitch for $150 million and get that sold to the Trump campaign. I'm gonna look at that specifically because a lot of our audience, maybe we got a future president listening or not, but most of our folks are looking at running for local and state level or congressional office. Sure. And running those types of campaigns. And while we're going to dive into how you guys won the presidential and the lessons learned from 2016, I want to make sure that we look first at what are some of the digital media and social media strategies that you think are really important to those types of campaigns specifically before we get kind of to the presidential level.
Yeah, no, sure, absolutely. And it goes for local and state and any type of candidate. I think it's just so important. And it's really interesting because there really isn't a secret sauce in regard to like a digital media strategy and we're going to do this day and this day, because in politics, honestly, that all kind of goes out the window because things are moving so fast. And I don't care. I mean, even for local candidates, I mean, things just change so much. And you really have to be able to have the agility to go, okay, well, for example, with a local candidate or something, well, Trump just tweeted this. How could we piggyback on this, or Cruz just, did this, or Sanders just did this, right? And so it's really a matter of kind of being, agile and being able to respond very quickly. It's kind of funny. It's like proactive but reactive, if that makes sense, right?
You want to be prepared and put yourself in a position, the best position to move in either direction. Right.
That's exactly right. Yeah. But I would say that the number one, and it doesn't matter, what social media platforms you're using, how much money you have for ads or for, just how much staff you have for organic. Really, the number one most important thing is authenticity. And it just ties back into that kind of realness. I mean, I will say, with Trump and with other candidates that I've worked with, the successful candidates that I've worked with, it all goes back to this authenticity. It all goes back to always understanding that, in this day and age, I mean, the voter is much more savvy than they've ever been before. And they're inundated with so many different, right, left, boom, boom, messaging, news, everything. That when you are authentic and you are real, people just now innately kind of sense that, and they sense a fake. And I just, if there's one piece of advice, it simply can't be learned. It's just kind of, just let it be who you are. I mean, if you're a stuffy, guy who wears ties a lot or whatever, then embrace it. Okay, awesome. I mean, if you're a woman, I mean, like me, I stand out like a sore thumb. I've got, a full sleeve on my arm. And I mean, I'm just not your typical Republican at all. But, if that's the case, be that person, be who you are, because in this day and age, and I think it kind of ties back to the branding as well. It really is more about your brand now than it is about issues. And that kind of ties into every single thing that you do, regardless of whether it's social media, whether it's digital, whether it's just traditional, everything just kind of ties back into that.
Well, I think that's a really good segue because, in our conversation with Bonnie 2 weeks ago, we talked a lot about the power of branding and kind of the revolutionary things that you guys have brought to the table through Political Branding Associates. And I think that kind of us having this kind of as nearly a second part to that branding conversation with you guys is really important because social media and the level of authenticity and realness you can bring there, if you choose to, is so powerful on the social scale side of things. And that's obviously something that rawness and intimacy was something that the president really highlighted from his own tweets on through the campaign. And that was a huge part of his brand, and he leveraged that very, very effectively. And that's part of how he built trust with his base throughout that campaign. When you're looking at a state house campaign or something like that here in Texas, what are some of those ways that you can you take your brand, identify that, having gone through some of those using some of those principles that Bonnie talked about, and then make sure you're translating that effectively? Because I think some people, even the ones that may have an idea of what the brand is and have put some conscious thought into that, when it comes to making sure that same brand is on social media and is consistent there, they can kind of lose track of it a bit.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why it's super, super important to, surround yourself. A lot of the statewide reps, our president, for crying out loud, they handle their own accounts, right? They handle their own social media platforms. So that's great. It's really a matter of when, staff, when they're taking over that, just to make absolutely positively sure that they are on that message and they are on that brand. And also really realize that, it's okay not to be all things to everyone. You've got to take a stance. And it goes back to that authenticity, you just, especially kind of like in the state of Texas, we're all over the place in Texas,
Absolutely.
And candidates who kind of embrace the fact that, I'm not going to get every single vote. Not everybody is going to like me. Not everybody's going to like my stance on things. And this is what I stand for. And some people are going to love it and some people are going to hate it. And that's okay. Yeah, obviously you want to win. And obviously, you push toward that. But it really does go back again, and I know I sound like a broken record, but to that authenticity and to that realness and just understanding, hey, I am who I am, and, this is what I want to do. This is how I'm going to work for you. This is how I want to improve things on your behalf. And really get the people involved in that process as well, behind the message, I should say, right?
Well, and the opportunity, whether it's through live Facebook or through handling some of your own social media accounts yourself, that level of intimacy that you can facilitate there, it really buys a lot of investment on the part of your voters in a way that previously wasn't possible, because it takes some of that intimacy of a person-to-person conversation, because you're showing up in their Facebook feed just like their best friend and their college roommate. Right? You're there having the same types of conversation, sharing memes, sharing maybe not the same memes, but you're sharing content. You're opening up a window into your life that has previously not been an option from campaigns, especially the higher level ones. But when you're able to utilize those tools and open yourself up, hopefully you're a likable person. Hopefully you're a decent human being.
Right. Yeah. Some, with some candidates, you wouldn't want them on Facebook Live, right? Because they might feel uncomfortable with it. It's just kind of finding that balance. And I think that digital media kind of, it embraces all kinds of, comfortableness and awkwardness kind of at the same time. It kind of opens up the doors and allows a candidate to choose, okay, well, what's going to be my best mouthpiece in this realm, right? Some people have absolutely mastered Facebook Live, and you look at it and you're like, wow, this is so cool. This is great. I've seen other candidates or just, even members that are trying to do Facebook Live. And I know it's because their staff's like, you got to do Facebook Live, or you got to do Snapchat, no, you don't. No, you don't. You don't have to. If you don't feel comfortable in something, then just don't do it. Do something you feel comfortable in. Not saying not to try things, but just, again, just like a candidate's not going to be all things to everybody, it kind of is whatever works for that individual candidate, as far as the messaging piece goes.
I think that's a huge lesson that people need to take away from this, because it's really easy, especially when you have younger staff that are in all these social media platforms, for them to be like, hey, boss, you've got to do all these things. This is how you got to do it, and try to fit them into the mold. But in an effort to make them more authentic and more real. But the problem is, if that's not who they are, then that's not being authentic and real, and that's going to come through clearly. And
that's exactly right. It's going to bite them in the butt if they do it that way, because they're not going to come across as authentic. They're going to come across as just, I'm totally uncomfortable. I don't like this, and I'm not on board with this.
Well, and two examples that come to mind from the presidential campaign were one was when Rand Paul did the full day of live streaming his day, basically from just about from nearly when he woke up and walked out the hotel door until he headed back in that night.
Yeah.
And in fairness to Senator Paul, if my whole day was being live streamed, I would probably get uncomfortable too, and I probably need some alone time. But
right.
Towards the end of the day, there were several times that he said stuff and did stuff that his staff were like, "Oh man, I wish we hadn't had that on video," because he was just getting ticked. He'd been in that mode all day, and it's hard to stay on all that time. But that's somewhere where you got to know your candidate, know really what's reasonable to ask of them.
That's absolutely, and they have to be comfortable around it. On that point, in Texas we have Congressman Hurd, and he went on that trip from El Paso to DC, and and he absolutely just embraced it. I mean, the guy obviously, he's very tech savvy. CIA and all into the cyber tech stuff, but it was completely in his element, and so he just embraced that. You can't force candidates to just be in situations that you can control, at least, that they feel uncomfortable with,
Well, and the second example that came to mind was Marco Rubio. I think it was before one of the debates. He spent some of his pre-debate prep time literally just throwing a football around in an empty one of the college stadiums or something like that. And had some different players come out, and he was throwing around the football, just hanging out with them. And they live streamed part of it, used some of the video. And it works really well for him. That's who he is. He's a football player. He's a jock. He's someone that's very comfortable in front of the camera and there. But I'll tell you what, I love Senator Cruz and I love working for him. But if I was going to put, if Bruce or I had put Senator Cruz throwing a football in front of the camera and on there, that would not have looked the same.
Right. Yep. Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And and you bring up a good point. You are very aware of that. And the staff and volunteers and everybody that either candidates or members, really, they just have to understand just strengths and possible challenges and limitations, and go just full speed after the strengths.
So even once we establish we have to know what our brand is, and we have to understand which mediums we're comfortable trying to communicate in, especially when it comes to the live side or the very transparent side there through the video. When you're looking at the types of content that folks need to be looking at, obviously with Facebook, there video and pictures and those types of things have more juice there as far as the sharing side. But what are some of the general rules you found for looking at the types of content that you try to focus on and really be heavy on, and why do those matter?
Well, let me tell you, and I think this goes to all the way from your local, and I don't care if you're running for, just councilman or councilwoman, all the way up to the President of the United States. You have to have three buckets, and those three buckets are obviously persuasion. You want to get out the issues, you want to do all that stuff. Fundraising, right? Because you need money, you need to pay your staff, you need to, fund your treasure chest, you need to do all that. And the GOTV, because you want to attract and encourage people that are coming up and voting. So they're kind of the three buckets within that digital media landscape that I focused on, that we focused on in the Trump campaign, and also that I focused on just working for other candidates, right? So within that, then it goes down to I know it's interesting because I've gotten calls from so many different news outlets regarding Trump and Project Alamo, and it's all data. And they kind of act like it's some kind of like Orwellian, like Ministry of Data type thing. And it's like, no, it's not that. It's like, it's like I'm looking at you right now at Skype, and it's not like I'm looking at people and going, oh, wow, I'm watching Linda right now, and, she likes chocolate ice cream, and she's watching Golden Girls, and blah, 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 blah. It's not like that. Which brings me to my point. Within those three buckets, it's super, super important to at least have some kind of data operation that supports you, that can kind of identify the audiences, the universes that you want to target, and what's going to work best with one audience versus another, right? So that really is, that played a huge role in our campaign on just magnitude of, I can't even describe the level of what that was, but it did play it played a huge part in being able to identify and serve people with the appropriate messages.
So I know that some campaigns, the way they typically do that is they have a number of different areas that are feeding them data, right? So they may have polling or market research information. They're going to have, their door-to-door campaigns, their different phone outreach and different types of voter contact, all feeding information back on what's working. And then you're able to take that data, and then you're able to test it on social media, because you have an ability to filter by all types of things and use all kinds of variables and previous likes and stuff to target people on Facebook and social media. Is that kind of, or how did you guys go about that? Did you guys kind of go through that same thing? You take the large data sets and then you basically infer from that how you should start your targeting, and then edit that targeting or kind of filter in on what's working?
Yeah. I always tell people that I am so not a data scientist, nor do I pretend to be. Those people had like brains on them that I couldn't even comprehend, right? I just would look at them in awe and just go, I don't even know how you're doing this. So what I will say though is that, yeah, they did. I mean, they had these millions and millions of data points, and they were able to kind of, and I'll get back to the local and stuff like that in a minute as far as, scalability. But, they were able to take just these groups of people and be able to go, oh, okay, well then this right here, their most important issue is, let's say, security, like border security. And then these people over here, oh, they're really, really concerned about healthcare, blah, 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 blah. So we were able to serve on that. Same with the ads. I mean, and the ads, it was really interesting because the ads, it wasn't uncommon to have like over 25,000 different iterations of the same ad on a single day. Wow. And it would just be tweaked. And I'll give a shout out right now to Gary Kobe, because Gary Kobe was the RNC digital ad director, and he was absolutely just brilliant with running this. I mean, we raised more money in small donations than any other Republican candidate in history. And it was really because of him. But it would just be, as much as like, oh, okay, well, let's just change this color. The button right now is red. Let's change it to green. Oh, well, right now we have Trump and his thumbs are up. Let's do one where he's wearing the MAGA hat, and it was just so many different iterations. And then we would just take which one was performing the best and be able to send those out to different people, right? So it's just that kind of data, using the data effectively to be able to reach those people. Now, as the digital content director, I will tell you that, and I think this was one of the major faults on the Clinton campaign, is that we never, ever, ever lost sight that those millions of data points were people.
Right.
And those people, they all had their individual hopes, their dreams, their aspirations. They were people. And so within that, we just always, like I said, kept it authentic. It wasn't hard to keep Trump authentic though, right? But we just kept the messaging authentic, and we kept everything just on par with who Trump the man was, and it worked. So yeah, I mean, it played a very, very important role. But again, data, I always say, and I normally say a bad word, but I won't, but it's like data isn't anything. It means nothing without good content, and good content without data is worthless as well. So there has to be that marriage in between the two, I think, to run a truly successful campaign.
No, I think you're 100% right. And the truth is that as much as we can give the principles and strategies for developing that content, there is a whole lot of testing involved. And I think that it's really important that the listeners, whether they're candidates or people that want to help on digital sides of campaigns, that they realize that you have to one, be wedded to what's effective, not your favorite idea. That you have to be willing to take and say, look, I think this is a great idea, but we're going to test it empirically, and we're going to be willing to go with somebody else's idea. We're going to be willing to go with that other color that I thought was kind of gross, but more people are clicking on that one because it's working well. And you have to be willing to chase the data and the testing. And 25,000 iterations, that absolutely blows my mind on that. Yeah. But so maybe not 25,000. You might have 25 when you're in a state house campaign. That definitely scales down quite a bit. But it takes a little bit of work, but it can make you so much more effective. And so I think you've got to really embrace both of those sides to your digital strategy. And you obviously prove that on the Trump side. But let's kind of go back there. I say having said that, I'm starting out as a first time digital director for a state house campaign or a state campaign. What are some of those, if I'm doing that, what are some of those top things that you're going to tell me to do or not do? No, what I would tell somebody that is going after that or has just been assigned and going, holy cow, what do I do? First of all, definitely identify a budget. And push for more money on that budget. Definitely push for more budget. I know that local and state, obviously they put more money into television, and I get that just because it's kind of the nature of the beast on that kind of level of campaigning. However, what the 2016 election showed is that, investing in digital really pays off in spades, and put 15 to 20% more of the overall marketing budget into digital, right? And then find out, okay, well, where are most of our voters? Are they on Facebook? Are they on Twitter? Is it a combination of this or that? Are they, and like, what are they interested in? What are they looking at? That's kind of the programmatic ads to where you're kind of delivering these different things. But it really is, it's imperative to make room in your budget to have that. And then with creating that strategy, again, it's kind of like, well, how much data do you have? Do you have existing data? A lot of people, understandably, campaigns, they can't afford a Cambridge Analytica. They can't afford, a big data house. So a lot of them, they're kind of relying on their existing data, and as you said before, pollsters and kind of traditional methods of gathering data. But also, with Facebook and things, you really can drill down and identify interests and identify issues and find out, okay, I want to target 18 to 26-year-olds and focus on, just, I don't know, a certain healthcare or something like that. And you can kind of create those kind of audiences and lookalike audiences and things to where you don't necessarily have to have a huge data house behind you. So believe me, it helps. But you can utilize the tools that a Facebook provides, Twitter provides, that kind of thing, to where you can target. You can do that, and within that, you can start really kind of building your first party data. You can start accumulating your own data without having to rely on other people, right? That's one of the major pluses that we did as well with the Trump campaign, is that we were able to gather data that, people hadn't voted in years and years and years. People were off the radar. They weren't being polled. They were non-existent. So we were able to kind of get those people, on the fringe into our databases as well. So just really, really pay attention to that too. And then, kind of create your strategy as far as, what are the issues, blah, 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 blah. But who is the person? Who is the person? Who is it? It truly, we're kind of getting into the age, and I think that Trump kind of proved this, is that, it's not your typical Republican and not your typical Democrat anymore. It's really the person that's behind that R or D. And I think that focusing on the candidate and the issues will follow naturally. You have to get people engaged and people caring about the candidate before these people just start right on in and like, okay, well, here's my issue 1 and my issue 2 and my issue 3. And it's like, no,
let me find out more about him or her, and let me see if I like him. Let me see if, let's see what's going on with it, And I think that's a big mistake for a lot of people as well, is that they just go straight on the issues, which are obviously very important. I mean, that's what we're sending them to do, right? is representing us. But like I said, at this day and age, it really is more about the person and the trust in that person.
Well, I think for so long we've had the issues have been so poll tested, and we trust politicians to do one thing, and that's say what they think is going to get them elected, right? Right. And so especially looking back at the primary field, you have 17 people starting out on the Republican side, and among those people, the issue sets that they had on their websites, you could kind of copy and paste from one to the other. There weren't that many differences. Trump's included. These were largely the same, although he did bring some of those issues like immigration to a new attention level. And so when you look at what set them apart, it comes down to that brand. And Bonnie and I talked a lot about how we think that really 2016 brought a new importance to that personal brand, and that it's really important as part of that sales process. You're not leading with the issues. You should have them set down. You should know what you believe and why you believe it. But that the first step in that process is it kind of really comes down to something I talk about a lot. It's an anecdote from Dr. Mark Campbell, who was Cruz's political director, and he said he was back in Iowa 30 years ago, and this diner waitress saw him reading some political article, and she's like, you know what? I just want to vote for somebody who's like me, who shares my values, is smarter than me, but doesn't act like it. And your opportunity there is you lead off with that like me part, right? I mean, that comes first in the story, but it's also the most important, I think, right now, is that you show yourself to be somebody they can see themselves spending time with, that is like them, that a person's friend group is not monolithic. We've all got all the different types of personalities in our friend group. But you're going to show them that you are somebody they can see themselves having some kind of relationship with. Absolutely.
Yes. Yep. You hit the nail on the head. I mean, it really is. It's that, okay, well, can I, and it doesn't even have to be, oh, wow, I'd love to have a beer with him or her or whatever. It's, hey, can I trust him or her? Or could I have him or her over for dinner? Or, it's like what you said, it's the likability, but it's also looking at yourself in the mirror and seeing, well, how does he or she relate to me and vice versa, And I think that so many people just are so stuck on processes and, oh, well, we have to do this and have to do that. I think that was the disaster that was the Clinton campaign. It was so run on, oh, we need to do this and we need to do that, and everything has to be in these perfect boxes. And then when they would try to get her out of a box, she'd be very uncomfortable because it wasn't her, right? Yeah.
And flexibility and being able to move and kind of roll with those punches is important. And you have to be able to actually get out and understand what people want and be able to communicate to them. And I think the one of the cool things about social media is it opens up a new opportunity for candidates to have that personal communication on a mass scale. And that's really an area that you've helped pioneer and done a ton of work in.
Yeah. And I will say too, like I said, a lot of people, a lot of candidates, they will run their own Twitter. They will run, Trump, he ran his own Twitter, right? That was his and his alone. But the Facebook, I wrote in his voice. So it's really important. Nothing turns me off. And when I speak to other people the same way, that when, you have this kind of dry Facebook or Twitter post or something that supposedly, the candidate's writing, and you can see right through it, and you're like, are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. Just make sure that you are absolutely positively that you have at least one person in your staff that can kind of envelop and capture the voice, so that it always, because let's face it, these people can't be tweeting or doing Facebook or whatever 1,000% of the time. They have to have somebody that can do it for them, and just make sure that they capture that as well. That just the whole thing just has to be seamless. It has to be authentic. People aren't stupid, people see right through it now. And I think that just, it's so interesting to me that politicians can lie, they can say whatever they want to, they can do, and I'm talking about just in general, right? Just in general. But boy, if they're authentic, or if they say, if they're, oh, well, that's just her, or that's just him, or whatever, it's cool, right? I mean, it's just human nature. Nobody wants to be duped. Nobody wants to just like, oh, well, he or she got one over me. So I think that's why with this age of just kind of boom in your face, kind of just, hey, this is me and this is what I'm going to do. And I think that it started with Trump, obviously, and we're going to see a lot of it. That's going to be the new wave. It's just, well, I mean, he's authentic. She says, how she feels, that kind of thing. And I think that's going to be very, very important in the coming years.
You raise a really good point, and that's the importance of the people that are helping on social media really understanding that candidate's voice and personality. And I got to see that through my interaction on the cruise side with Josh Perry, who we interviewed a few months ago on here. He, from the early days of the Cruz Senate campaign back in 11 and 12, on through the presidential, he was the primary guy that was driving a lot of that social media. And there are obviously on the presidential side a lot of other folks involved, but ultimately it was him or the senator pretty much writing those tweets and a lot of the Facebook content. And so Josh got to spend a whole lot of time around him, driving him around in Texas, flying with him around the country, being with him up in D.C., got to know him that way. But I think that as folks are looking at setting up their campaigns, it's important that even if their digital director is not going to be, if they're not somebody that's necessarily qualified or experienced enough to have a senior voice in some of those policy discussions, that they in large part, they need to be in the room. Because they need to understand and have an intimate understanding of the candidate, the way they think, the way they speak, both formally and informally. That strikes me something that's quite important.
Absolutely. Yes. And that is a great point that you raise. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people will look at, these social media kind of, coordinators or whatever you want to call them. Oh, well, they're not going to be in any high level meetings or whatever. Biggest mistake you can make. They need to be involved. They need to have that chair at the table so that at least they can look and understand what the method to, everybody's kind of madness is, and be able to speak just not even, anybody can kind of speak on, well, this is what he believes and blah, 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 or she believes. But to bring back that authenticity with it, to bring back that kind of message with it, to be able to interject, as stupid as it is, or as, whenever I was writing for Trump, there were a lot of believe me's, there were a lot of sad, there was, there was a lot of just his isms that kind of just made it into the Facebook post, because people would look at it and go, yeah, no, of course Trump did that. There was like an article like right before the election, and it's one of the biggest compliments that I ever got, because basically what they were saying is they were kind of comparing the Facebook and even Twitter, the posts, who was Trump and who was not. And so all of mine was like, oh no, that's Trump. And I was like, yeah, all right.
I got my job well done.
Yeah. But no, I definitely would. If you're going to be, if you're hiring a social media person, make sure that he or she is included on those kind of high level, and make sure that he or she is able to spend time with the candidate and just really kind of get inside that method to be able to go, okay, how can I get the authentic self on the times when he or she can't run the social media accounts, that kind of thing.
I think you're 100% right. And it also gives the candidate opportunity to hear what they're seeing online, because, I can guarantee even if the candidate's doing some of their own posting, they're not the ones in most cases that are diving into the analytics, that are looking at the data, that knows what's working, what's not. And so, they really deserve to see that table. But sometimes I think it can kind of be hard, especially when you're talking about a young person, because many of these folks who are coming up to be social media campaign managers for a city council or a state rep or state senate race, they're folks that are younger. These are talking about young 20s in a lot of cases.
Right.
That they're willing to work hard and work for cheap. And they have some experience because they've grown up and lived in that world their whole lives.
Sure.
And so I think that you got to realize as a candidate, just because this person is young, just because they haven't worked on a campaign before, does not mean that they don't deserve a seat at that table. And it doesn't mean there's not going to be areas where they may not know what they're talking about, and you got to work that out on the personnel side and just let them have a clear lane to operate in. But they're going to be able to bring you incredible insights from what they're seeing online and seeing in those Facebook analytics and on their Twitter feeds. But they're also going to be somebody that can help learn from you, and they can absorb so much of your personality to make you multiple times more effective.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I just think that anybody who's involved in the messaging, the content, that kind of thing, and I don't care who you are, I don't care if you are a junior writer, you should be included with that. And campaign managers, I mean, they need to pay attention to that. They need to make sure that everybody is on the same page when it comes to brand, when it comes to messaging, and just when it comes to really knowing who you are, who you're representing, who you're pitching, right? I mean, yeah, I shake my head whenever I hear that as far as campaign manager, we're going to have these upper level meetings and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and the whole comms, you're not including them?
Yeah, doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Well, and a lot of that comes down to, access is power. And sometimes you have consultants or managers that want to limit the people that are at that table, and it's one of the things that's on a human level is understandable, but it's also sad because you can't there's some people you don't want at that table that shouldn't be there, but you have to truly take your ego out of the equation and think who needs to be here, who needs to be in these meetings to make this candidate and the campaign more effective and increase their chances of winning. And I really think it's important that people from the social media side, your top folks there, they need to really, it may not need to be in all of them, but that especially when it comes to anything touching voter contact, especially when it comes to their specific area of voter contact, social media, direct mail, door to door, they got to be involved because they know things about that nobody else does because they're in it all the time.
Absolutely. And I will say too, on just an engagement and a loyalty standpoint, if you include those people, that and if you really make them feel like they are part of the team, man, they are going to work so much harder for you, and they're going to be more invested. And I feel like, communications, messaging, that kind of stuff, give them a seat at the table. They won't disappoint. So.
All right, so let's shift over to kind of what I consider kind of the fun part of this interview. So let's talk about the Trump campaign itself. Now, you came on after he won the primary. He became he wasn't the nominee yet prior to the convention, right? Mm-hmm. So you're coming on there. There had been obviously a significant digital effort during the primary, and you were coming on. Kind of talk to me starting out about how that works. You're coming into an existing machine, and you're bringing in your team. You're taking over this for the general. That's not always easy transition, but it's something that every campaign has to do between the primary and the general. There's a restaffing or increasing staff. You had a huge hill to climb, right? You're going up against somebody else that had nearly universal name ID that had been involved in politics, the public sector for over 30 years. And so you're going up against the prohibitive favorite in that effort. And you're tasked with the entire digital side of this campaign, which you knew from the get-go was going to be huge, as the president would say. So, So talk to me about, as you're crafting that plan and then starting to implement that, just tell me what that was like.
Yeah, for the primaries, Giles Parskill was handling Trump with the primaries, so that was really good. When we transitioned over to the general and we had the RNC involved, we're starting to become involved. Yeah, it's interesting because as we were getting teams in place, I'll never forget, our offices were like right by the airport. And when the campaign first started, it was 4 people looking at each other in a room and Brad going, make cool stuff,
That's great.
While we were assembling all of these teams. Yeah, it's like, just make cool stuff. And so it was super, super interesting to where, it was planned But at the same time, it seemed like it kind of organically grew. And within, 10 days, that little motley crew of like 4 people had grown, and we had, people from the RNC, and we had people from Facebook, and we had people from Google and YouTube, and we had people from, the Prosper Group, and we had people from Moonshot. I mean, we had all of these different components that were starting to happen then. And then it got really, really interesting. And that's when it's so funny, because I'm sure that most people expect, like, oh gosh, the growing pains and this and that and blah, blah, blah. We were such a well-oiled machine, and I'll tell you, and I know that this sounds really horrible, but because the majority of us kind of came from the corporate side and not the political side, we didn't know any better about the red tape and, oh, this is how things should be, and that's
a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. So we were really able to, kind of push through and try things that probably would be frowned upon in a traditional campaign. But because we did have Brad and like I said, Gary was just fantastic. And then Trump himself, I mean, Trump's like, try it. Let's see if it works. Try it. Everything was try it. And that was just awesome. And so with all of this team, I mean, we had the email component, and we had the SMS and the MMS. We had the organic, just kind of social media. We had the persuasion paid ads. We had the, fundraising ads. We had all of these different components. And I've got to say that everybody got along beautifully, and everybody worked together beautifully. I've never been, I mean, obviously, yeah, it was a boiler room and the pressure was on, but I've never worked with a better group of people from all over the world, really. So it really was, it's like always like, oh gosh, what was it like? What was the transition like? And just everything. And it's like, well, it actually was really pleasant, and it just worked. And it was nice to be trusted, all of us. The one thing about President Trump is that if he trusts you and you do, you work hard and you do good work, you can really do just about anything, as long as it's beneficial to the campaign. And that's what we all did. So it worked.
It obviously did. I think one of the really cool things about and both the Cruz and the Trump campaigns did this, but it was especially obvious with President Trump, was that the corporate sector experience was highly valued. And
yes.
that was from the top down, whether from President Trump on down, from looking at Ted Cruz and Jeff Rowe on down, bringing in people like yourself and Bonnie, folks that had in 2016, Ted Cruz, that was Bonnie's first political campaign. It wasn't the first time she had worked in branding. She had extensive experience there. You had extensive experience both from the political and the for-profit, the corporate side of the social media. And I think the value there was, and something that's kind of been throughout our interview, that you have to be willing to go with what works, not the way you've always done it. You can't be wedded to a certain playbook. You have to be willing to look for new ways to do things and experiment, and be willing to adopt other people's ideas because they turn out to work better. And in the corporate world, you get a whole lot of experience with that. And I don't know, because I haven't done as much there, but there seems to be a little bit less ego attached to it than there is on the political side. And I think that's something that more and more campaigns need to emphasize, because it can be an absolutely terrible cancer if the egos are getting in the way of what works.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would agree with that. And I think that is why, I think Brad really did assemble a very good team, and a good combination of people who had been in the business for a long time, and then people just that kind of came with, a fresh perspective on things. And I think that marriage really worked for us. And it was interesting because, you did see a few people who had been in the political arena for years and years and came from, more traditional campaigns. And sometimes their head looked like it was going to explode. Because it was so different. It was so groundbreaking what we were doing. It was so It was different. We invented our own rule book. Brad Parscale, Gary Kobe, Cambridge, like Matt Oskowski, they didn't rewrite the playbook. They freaking invented a whole new playbook. And I think that at this point in time, if the Dems ever figure it out, then maybe we'll have a level playing field. But I don't know if they ever will, only because we did things so differently.
Well, you guys definitely did come up with a whole new playbook. One of the things you mentioned earlier was the necessity of being active and reactive when it comes to the social media side, that you're having to react to external forces and sometimes internal forces as well, with President Trump tweeting and some of those things. But you guys had a lot from when you were going into convention on through the general election. There were a lot of those times when you guys were in a position where you're having to figure out, you're sitting there and say, hey, how do we handle this? And that can be from small to big things. But I know that there was a number of those for you guys. Can I talk to me a little bit about what some of those were and how you guys attacked those?
Well, I mean, President Trump being President Trump, I mean, I'll say one thing that just was hysterical, and then I always call it, I don't know if you're familiar with it or any of your listeners would be familiar with it, but I always call it the Leroy Jenkins moment, because
yes, I'm familiar with it.
Because we had been planning for a good week for Vice President Pence's announcement. And it was all going to be very, very calculated and formulated and grandiose. And we had all of this, the wonderful content that went around with it, and just everything was cool. And, and we were ready. And President Trump just, I guess one day was like, oh, screw it. And he just tweeted it out. It's like, yeah, my vice president's gonna be Pence, and it was like, drop the microphone, and we all looked at each other like, are you? Yeah, it was like, dang it, Leroy. So within that kind of, and that was kind of at the beginning, obviously, and so we were kind of getting used to that. We were always very, what you said, proactive, reactive, what I said too. We were always ready to not necessarily counteract or just, kind of not validate anything that he said, right? Because, I mean, Trump is Trump. But just kind of like, well, okay, now we can release all this stuff. So this is cool. Let's release all of our cool graphics we've been working on for a week, and the videos and all that kind of stuff. And so we knew very early on that this was part of Trump's brand. We knew that he's going to say what he wants to say at 7 o'clock in the morning or 2 in the morning or whatever. And we just kind of embraced it, at least, and I did, from a content and a messaging standpoint. You just kind of embrace it, and you just say, okay, well, this is how we'll work it. So it wasn't. A lot of people think it was a really big deal, and just, oh my gosh, I can't believe that he did this. Or, to me, it was just, oh well, that's just Trump being Trump, and let's just take this angle for it. Let's do a Facebook post with this on it or whatever, or, oh, let's make an ad out of it. That was Gary's thing, or just do whatever. And we just kept on we never let anything get us off of our game. Never, not once. Through everything, we always were steadfast, and we always believed 100% in him, and we backed him 100%. And when you have a team that backs you like that, and that's another piece of advice too for all of these people who are running, surround yourself with a good team, surround yourself with a loyal team. I think that's half the battle as well. If you have people that are willing to completely and totally walk through fire for you, then you're good. And I think that, politicos, I mean, they would have tried, they did. I mean, there were, and I know that Bonnie spoke about this, a couple weeks ago on the podcast, that whenever, I mean, when he did get a new campaign manager, or if he got an advisor, they try to make him something that he wasn't. He just wasn't. It wasn't him. I mean, Reagan, same way. It's so interesting when you allow people to be themselves, regardless of what they do, and you just kind of embrace it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. 9 times out of 10, it's going to work in your favor anyway. I mean, it's crazy. I don't know if that would have been the case even 10 years ago or whatever, but I don't know. I mean, we really embraced who he was, and I think a lot of that just had to do with his brand and just accepting who he was.
Well, it's kind of funny because just being an outside observer and talk with folks during the campaign, and, you'd see those tweets come out, and from my side, I would look at it and I would be like, man, it's got to be an interesting job working in that war room, because you have those things you have planned out. And then all of a sudden you see that tweet come out you get the notification that President Trump just tweeted something at 2 a.m. You're like, oh crap, what are we doing now? The day has changed. My night has changed. Yeah. But I mean, kudos to you guys, because from the outside, it was obvious. There was no hitch that came across there. There was no stumble in that step. You guys knew him. You knew that those were going to happen. You might not know when it was going to occur, but you knew that they were going to happen infrequently. Right. And so I think you guys did a great job of not trying to change him. You knew you couldn't take away the phone. You couldn't change his password. He was going to be tweeting.
Did we want to? Because we knew that that's what the public loved.
Right.
The only people that cringed on that were the fellow politicos that had been in the business way too long, and the news media. I mean, the people who voted for him absolutely loved it and still love it. I mean, that's his bullpit. That's where he brings his message to the people. And if that's what they want, then by golly, that's what he'll deliver.
So looking forward to coming up on the election, and I'm not sure quite how much you can share, but definitely share what you can. So we're coming to the election. Everybody in the whole wide world is thinking, the people that are being polled, or the news media were saying he had like a 2% chance of winning. Yeah. You're coming up. I personally did not think he was going to win. I thought it might be reasonably close, but I didn't. I would not have put money on him winning. And so you're coming up on the election in those last couple weeks and last couple hours. What are you guys thinking and seeing? I mean, what were you feeling there?
I never thought, not once, I never thought that he wasn't going to win. And I'll tell you why. And I was very, very lucky and fortunate. My husband worked on the campaign with me. He's a videographer. And so we had to watch the rallies 3 or 4 times a day because Trump was doing a rally 3 or 4 times a day. We were watching this swell. We were watching things that weren't being reported on the news. We were watching in the middle of the day with Right Side Broadcasting, who was, live streaming these rallies. We were getting, on a slow day, we were getting 25,000 people watching. On a big day, we were getting like 75,000 people watching, like online during work or whatever they were doing. We were seeing that swell. We never had a doubt. We never had a doubt. And as Brad always says, we kind of focused on those states as far as concentrating on the states that Hillary definitely ignored. And we knew, it's going to be electoral. I mean, obviously. So on that note, yeah, in my gut, I knew he was going to win. I absolutely knew he was going to win. Now, I know a lot of people on the inside that didn't think he was going to win. I did. I really, really did. I mean, there were a lot of people, even just on the data side, that were saying, no, it's not showing. It's not showing. But when, you look at kind of the core people, Brad Parscale, myself, my husband, a few others, we were steadfast. We knew. And, yeah, so when it started coming in, and we stayed in San Antonio, most of Project Alamo did. There were several people that did go home or were in New York City or whatever, but we stayed in San Antonio, and we had a party, and I just will never forget just the numbers coming in and just going, man. And it was about 2 a.m, and we were at this bar, and I went into a corner, and my father was a hardcore Trump supporter. He's a combat Vietnam veteran, lost both of his legs, and And I called him, and it was it was really, really early in the morning. And he answered the phone, and he said, by golly, he said, you guys did it. He's like, you guys did it. And that was, I mean, it was awesome. I mean, it was an awesome, awesome feeling to be working for this just outsider, non-Politico, wanting to drain the swamp, wanting to break everything, the underdog. And we were all hated for it. I mean, I can't tell you how many friends I've lost over it. But to have that, wow, it's not going to be another same old 4 years. Like we have this opportunity now to start over, right? I mean, whether you love him or hate him, hey, he's changing stuff, right?
So. Love him or hate him, those next 4 years are going to be different than they would have been otherwise, that they'd be different than anybody else, Republican or Democrat. That was very clear. And I'll tell you what, it was that election night, especially for the folks on the team that didn't see it coming, it had to be something really special. But for those of you guys that truly believed that it was going to be a win, that had to be pretty cool. I definitely am impressed by that. That's I've been on both sides, the winning and losing. Never been on either side of that for something that big, but it's an incredible feeling. It was, and it still is, and I personally still support him 1,000%, and I look forward to the next 8 years, really. So we'll see what happens. Well, I think that's a natural segue into talking about one of the biggest, the hottest conversations that's been occurring over the last since that election day, among really the whole country, but especially among folks in our profession working in politics, and that is what has changed and what is still the same. And I've heard a lot of different perspectives from folks from nothing has changed. It's going to be, this is just just kind of a fluke election, to oh my gosh, nothing is ever going to be the same. It's a totally new playbook from up and down ballot. And I'm really interested to hear your perspective on that. What are really the lessons that candidates across the spectrum need to take away from 2016?
Yeah, I think that it's less about the party now and more about the person running. I definitely think that needs to be front and center. I think that both parties suffered a big jolt. I think they're kind of in this identity crisis at this point in time, that they really don't know who or what they represent. And I think that is a direct reflection on how misinformed they are of like what the pulse is of the everyday people out there that are like working and living and dying and in the communities out there, right? So what I hope, if anything, going forward is that they understand their constituents. They understand the voters. They understand what people really, really want. And I think that was a major disconnect in this election. And I think that a lot of that has to do with, again, going back to the more savvy voter now. The good, bad, and ugly with social media. I mean, you're still inundated with everything. You have all of these opinions, being kind of driven down your throat. It's up to you to kind of decide. You know what that is? That goes back to, what Bonnie says and what I say. It's the brand. So you can say as much as you want. You can, throw as much fodder out as you want. Fake news, whatever you want to call it. You can't fake a person these days, and that's why it's like if you really want to break through that crowd, and if you really want people to know you better get behind a brand. You better identify and really embrace your personal brand, because if you don't, you're going to be grouped, and people are going to group you, and it doesn't matter if it's me or you or the media or anything else. Don't let them control the message. You've got to control your own message. And I think that begins with brand. And that's what Trump was brilliant with. I mean, I mean, obviously we didn't create his brand. He already had an existing brand from years and years ago. So it was fairly easy just to kind of follow that brand, no matter how uncomfortable people felt about it. The majority of people loved it. And I just think it's because, like I said, if you loved him or hated him, he was who he was, and he was in your face about it, and he was authentic. That's where I think the future is coming. And that's why I'm super, super interested seeing some of these up and comings that are going. And you can really tell if they're comfortable being that kind of bull in a china shop kind of thing. Or I mean, you can really tell these days, okay, well, that person right there is trying to be this, but he or she isn't, and vice versa. So I really do agree that the political landscape has been changed forever. I think that parties have completely and totally just been, I mean, they've been a bit annihilated in the sense to where I think that they are in some kind of identity crisis. And I think we're going to see more and more individuals running more like on a high school class president kind of platform, like they have to kind of like, oh, I guess I gotta call myself Republican or I gotta call myself Democrat. But it's really going to be this kind of mix of who this person is and what they represent for the people they serve.
You're 100% right. Looking at that, the side of that political branding, I think is critical. And I'll tell you, one of the areas where I think President Trump did an incredible job, it was sticking to his brand. He had established a brand over 30 or 40 years, and that did not change when he ran for office. And some people, they wondered or thought that his brand was not good or that it wouldn't work in politics. It obviously did. But I've seen some candidates who I think have learned some of the wrong lesson. And I think that's that there's a difference between saying that Trump's brand is the brand to adopt versus your brand is the one to adopt. Because I've seen people that they've tried to adopt that bull in a china shop brand, and they try to like take Trump's brand and white label it for their own, and it doesn't work. If that's not who you are, it's not going to work. So make sure you adopt your brand. Don't take away the lesson that Trump's brand is now what you have to adopt.
Right. I mean, it's quite simple. It's just don't be someone who you aren't. If you feel uncomfortable, like candidates who are watching or people who are like watching this in hopes of maybe running, if you feel uncomfortable in your own skin,
it's going to come across.
Something is horribly wrong. And you have to come back to that authentic you, whatever that means. I mean, it could be anything. And yeah, I mean, that truly is the takeaway with everything, I think, of the 2016 election cycle, is that it's just be comfortable in your own skin and the rest will follow, and don't be all things to everyone, because boy, that's a recipe for disaster. So
Well, we know that branding's important. The conversation with you and Bonnie have made that clear, and what we see in the news. And that's what you guys do full time at Political Branding Associates. You focus on identifying, building, and deploying that brand to help campaigns win. Let's tell us a little bit more about what you guys do and what you can do to help our listeners or other campaigns build their brand and win their campaigns.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Bonnie comes from the corporate world, and so she has been identifying and kind of solidifying brands for corporate entities for years and years and years. And as she had said, she was summoned by Cruz to establish his brand and was successful at it. And the reason why she's successful at it is that she really does, we kind of delve deep into that kind of brand essence and who that person is. I think that the trend has been historically that, oh, well, we're going to put up the slick logo. We've got great merchandise. We've got an awesome website. You know what? There's the brand. Boom, done. Okay. And that's simply not the case. It really has to kind of embrace and incorporate, attributes of that individual person into everything, into not just the logo and the website and all that kind of stuff, but also the messaging and the content and even the way that he or she, addresses the public. Just everything, and all the way, from just bottom up. Everybody should be aligned with that brand as well. So yeah, I think that now more than ever, and again, I think that campaign, like the managers and consultants, I think that they inherently know what that brand is. Like they know that, oh, well, yeah. But I think that they're still kind of in that mentality to where it's like, okay, well, we're just going to take what we think is this brand and we're going to box it up into issues, right? Instead of going backwards and saying, no, we need to identify this personal brand and what this person stands for and what this person is made of, and then kind of go into like creating that roadmap for the rest of the campaign. And I think it's severely, it's been lacking. And I think that everybody has, I mean, it's so interesting to me. Everybody is so like, well, something changed this time. Something changed. What is it? What is it? What is it? It's branding. I mean, it absolutely is branding. And you just, it's on the tip of everybody's tongue, but that's what won. Trump won because he had a strong brand. Period. You know, I mean, yeah, didn't not help having, you know, a huge team behind him. Well, not a huge team, but a team behind him that really supported him. But really, it was his brand, you know. And people with strong brands were able to kind of break through the fray, and others were just kind of eaten up by the people with strong brands. So it's interesting, you know.
I think that's a wonderful way to sum up 2016, the lessons of it. It's pretty important, and I love what you guys do from your branding workshops and focusing on early on before the campaign launches. Really get in with folks and explore who they are and what those attributes are that you can saturate the rest of from the merchandise to the website to the logo on through there. I think that's really innovative, and I think that's obviously been very effective for you guys. And I hope that the folks will check you guys out and get to know what you do better. Where can folks do that? Where can folks go to find you online and find more about what you guys do?
Yeah, they can go to politicalbrandingassociates.com and just check it out and just, you know, kind of see our experience and kind of our philosophy and, you know, what we do different, and find out how we can help you. We want to help. We want to keep Republicans in office, and we want to kind of shape the next up and coming. And it doesn't matter if they're local. It doesn't matter if they're presidential. It doesn't matter if they're everything in between. Our main focus is we want to maintain, you know, a Republican leadership with our nation, and moving forward. And so, you know, with that really does kind of depend on brand, and that's what we do. We focus on the individual, not the party.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Theresa. I hope everybody really enjoyed our conversation today. I know that I did, and I'm sure the listeners did as well. Y'all, if you're enjoying this podcast, please don't forget to subscribe. And I'd also appreciate if you guys get the chance to give us a nice review as well. If you got questions for me or people you'd like me to bring on as guests, go to mycampaigncoach.com and shoot me a message. I always love connecting with people that are listeners and getting great ideas for folks to bring on. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll talk to y'all again next week.
Please subscribe and rate us on iTunes to help spread the word. We'll be back with you next week with more campaign insights from My Campaign Coach.